Hi, and welcome to the DIY Photo Organizing podcast, focusing on topics to help you with your photo management. I'm Chantal from Photos in Order.
And I'm Fiona from Photo Helper. Hi, Chantal. How are
Hello,
you?
Fiona. Very good. How are you?
Fabulous. Thanks. So, today our episode is about converting old media to digital. And we are thrilled to chat with our very special guest, Adam Pratt from Chaos to Memories. Hi, Adam, and welcome to our podcast.
Hey guys, thank you. I appreciate the invitation and I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I must say, Chantal, I'm very excited because I have to say that Adam probably, well, he would definitely be seen as like a giant in our industry. Would you agree?
Yes, totally.
It's true. It really is. Adam's been just such a great influencer in our industry. So it really is a privilege to have him on board today. So let me just fill you guys in a little bit about Adam and why we're excited to have him on board today. Adam Pratt is the founder of Chaos to Memories, where he helps families enjoy their photos again with archival scanning, video conversion, digital photo organizing, and also a whole range of other things with trainings and courses. So Adam's based in Chicago and he works with clients locally and throughout the US and all around the world. So, Adam, welcome and thanks so much for joining us today. I'd just like to jump in and start off. If you can just share with us and our listeners a little bit about how you found yourself in this fabulous industry and business in photo organizing.
Yeah, well, I do agree with you that it's fabulous. I really love the work that we get to do. We often start with our own projects, and that's part of my story. But I love helping clients with their projects as well. And it wasn't obvious to me that I was going to get into this work, but it probably should have been. Hindsight's always clearer, but I have about 25 years of experience in scanning. So, all sorts of equipment and types of scanners. So, scanning images, I've got, at least that much time in graphic design as well. And I've also spent a lot of time just in technology in general, software, hardware, digital photography, video, all of these realms. And about 10 years ago, I kind of found my own passion for preserving and organizing my family photos and videos. So I got all of that scanned and organized and preserved and loved it. And started to realize that this was the natural overlap of all those past experiences that I had had.
Mm.
And then I started to wonder, am I the only one? Does anybody else need help with this? And I quickly found out that I was not the only one. And apparently, you guys have found the
Mm.
same thing.
Yes.
Yes. That's very true. That's very true. So yeah, that look, I think it's so great that when you've got a passion for this for yourself, then it is a very natural sort of extension to be able to really reach out and help others, and that's your nature in a lot of different ways. So I think that it sounds like. So how long have you been in business for now, then, Adam?
Yeah, so my business I launched about 2.5 years ago. So I haven't been doing this for other clients for very long, but I have been doing this professionally for literally 20 plus years. I started again scanning content and I was managing digital archives of photos, videos, I've even managed audio archives. So I've been doing this for a long time, but I'm doing it in a new way now, just in the last
Fabulous.
couple years.
Mm.
Oh, that's great. So, as we're talking about today, on our podcast, we sort of touch on a whole range of different things. But we thought, with your experience, we would focus today on converting media and just sort of helping our listeners look at some of the options that might be available to them, some of the mysterious things that they might find in their cupboards and things like that. So, just along those lines of talking about the different types of media, what would you say are the different types that we might find, say, even in your own sort of cupboards and things you've come across for yourself? For different types of media that needs converting, say, that we can enjoy them today and ongoing.
Yeah, great question. If I were to paint broad brushstrokes, I think we could put it in three categories that might be helpful. And we can talk more specifically, but the really broad categories are anything you can see, anything you can watch, like a video, and
Mm-hmm.
anything you can hear. So, photography, video, audio, all of those can be captured and preserved, recorded, and shared digitally. Um, Thinking about some specific examples, like in photography, everybody is familiar with photo prints and like 35 millimeter negatives, maybe slides, things
Mm.
like that. But I get a lot of crazy stuff. Sometimes even I'm surprised. I've had a few formats come to me this year that I didn't even know existed before. So I like the discovery of it all. Um,
Mm.
but there's all sorts of stuff out there, different formats, old formats or obscure formats. And with a little bit of research, you can really, scan or convert really any of that stuff. But those are the three categories that I
Mm.
think about.
Mm.
So, for us as photo organizers, of course, it is sort of quite obvious that conversion is part of what we do. Whether we do it ourselves or we work with somebody who is specialized like you. So, but often people are or might be hesitant to convert their old media. Have you come across that? And do what would be the reasons why they're hesitant?
Yeah, some folks definitely are hesitant. A couple patterns have emerged for me as I've worked with clients. The first obstacle is people just don't realize that it can be converted. I think most people are familiar with like a flatbed scanner,
Mm-hmm.
which has been around for decades, hasn't really, changed much, but most people are familiar with that and scanning, like a photo print. They don't even know that a negative or a slide can be scanned. I have clients surprised all the time, and I say, well, not only can we, but we should, because
Mm.
you'll probably get a
Mm.
better result from that negative. So just awareness that it's even possible is one of the first big obstacles.
Mm. That's a good point. I
Yeah.
never really thought about that. So, and in general, as photo organizers, that's also a big part of our work to actually educate people and give them the information and tell them what we can do.
Yeah. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
The other one of the other challenges is the fact that people come to me and they have like maybe old videotapes. They don't even know what they're called, right? Like we just
Yes.
not everybody has the vocabulary for it.
Mm.
They don't really
Mm.
have the vocabulary, and they also oftentimes they don't have the devices, right? No,
Mm-hmm.
very few people have a VCR anymore, or
Yeah.
maybe they have the old like small video camera tapes, like Video 8 or High 8,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But maybe they don't have the camera anymore, or the battery's dead because it's
Mm-hmm.
25 years old. It doesn't charge anymore.
Yeah.
So they think they're kind of at a dead end. But the good news is they can connect with an expert, somebody local that they trust,
Mm.
and they
Yeah.
can get that stuff preserved.
So, do you
Mm.
actually convert all these different formats yourself, or do you also work with other people for certain formats?
Yeah, so I do virtually everything. The only format that I don't do myself by hand is Super 8.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get a lot of that format, and the equipment to do it well is rather expensive. So I do want to have it done well, but I haven't made that investment. I have a local partner that I work with on that, but everything else, all of the videotape formats, all of the scanning, the audio conversion, I do that myself, and I really enjoy it. I've worked in digital so much and for so many years that to get my hands on some old photos or some videotapes is kind of fun again.
Mm.
Mm. So one of the things, just jumping into it, like you were talking about with the actual sort of the practical side of how to scan. So people that are listening, on the podcast, because it's really a DIY. They're sort of exploring the options, I guess, of doing this themselves.
Hmm.
So it's always nice to sort of give a few sort of tips and tricks of options that they may maybe try to look at. So I know just from our listeners' point of view, they may not be aware of a thing called camera scanning, which is a whole new world in itself, an awareness that people can sort of try. I know you're an expert in this, and you're actually finishing and doing a course to help train people and teach people to do this themselves through that method. Can you just shed some light on like you just touched on the flatbed scanning, but this other option called camera scanning.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a topic I'm passionate about. I love it. Again, most of us are familiar with flatbed scanners, and these are pretty affordable and they're pretty flexible. So for just a couple $100 in any currency around the world, they're pretty
Mm,
modestly priced, and you can scan, flat photos. Many of them, even at a modest price, will allow you to scan slides and negatives, which is nice. The downside is it's pretty slow.
mm.
Any kind of scanning is tedious. Let's just get that out there.
Yeah.
Um, but the flatbeds tend to be pretty slow. The work that I've been doing the last couple of years is all camera scanning, as you mentioned. So I
Mhm.
use kind of a custom rig, like with a copy stand and light sources and special film carriers, along with a really high resolution. We're talking like 50 plus megapixel professional camera.
Mhm.
And it sounds a little funny to take pictures of old pictures, but I can
Mhm.
actually get higher quality, higher resolution, and I can get the job done faster than I could ever do with like a flatbed scanner. And even if people aren't familiar with this, it's growing in popularity and it's commonly done at really great institutions like museums, libraries, archives. This is how
Mhm.
most high end scanning is done these days.
Mhm.
So it's fun to be a part of that.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. And so if someone's, say, doing this themselves, is that okay, so this is a bit of a crude question about phone. This is like to your ears. It's like, no, 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 don't tell me. If someone's thinking, oh, I'll just use my phone and take photos and scanning that way, say, I've got a
Hmm.
camera, it's on my phone. What advice would you give if people, I mean, there's apps out there and things like that. What's your take on that as an option for people to
Yeah.
capture these? Yeah.
Yeah, good question. So I don't want to rain on anybody's parade. I would say that if I had to choose between an app on my phone and say like a $200 scanner, I would pick the $200 scanner every single day.
Mm.
Um, Despite all the market, like I love my iPhone, I have a brand new iPhone, I really like it, but despite all the marketing, it's not the best
Mhm.
sensor in the camera and not the best lens, in my opinion, to preserve your like really precious family photos or your grandmother's photo or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Mm.
The catch, the way I look at this is the as I mentioned, the process of scanning is tedious. So if you're going to take all of this time to get everything out and gather it and organize it and stack it and sequence it, the bulk of the time is there, really. So if
Mhm.
you're going to do all of that work, I would suggest take a little bit more time and a little bit more money and at least do it on a flatbed. You're going to get better results, and that way you're going to only have to do this one time, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I want people to be successful with this, and my concern would be the phone is kind of quick and convenient, but the quality probably isn't what most people expect, and
Mm.
I would just be sad if you had to do it again.
Mm.
I'm
And
interested.
that's,
Sorry,
yep, go, Chantal. No, no, you
in
go.
talking about the camera and scanning. I'm just thinking, in practical terms. So you take a picture of the picture.
Hmm.
How about the post processing? So I imagine you have to crop them all, or do you still have to adjust, color and things, or is it pretty much done when once you've got a good setup and you've got all your settings and lighting right, that you don't
Yeah.
actually have to process it much more in the digital world?
There is a little bit of processing. I wish it was instant and perfect, but there are enough variables with old photos that there is a bit of processing. The good news is that a lot of it can be automated. So, for example, I actually just finished a pretty big project scanning about 16,000 negatives for a client.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so lots of scanning,
Yep.
Mm.
but most of them are the same format, kind of similar era, and so I do have post processing to do, like cropping and things like that.
Mm.
But when I can do that in batch, like thousands at a time,
Mm.
it speeds up the process. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely some work, but not as tedious as it might sound.
Mm. And
Mm.
you do everything in Lightroom, I assume?
I do, yeah. I do all of my organizing in Adobe Lightroom Classic, and I actually use that for scanning as well, which sounds a little weird because, Lightroom isn't a scanning
Mm,
application, but when I connect it with USB to my camera, um, my files come instantly into Lightroom, and there I can do edits. And that's actually really nice because if I'm scanning really old formats or color negatives, which are really tricky to convert, it's like
mm.
one of the hardest things I have to do. The software makes that easier. So that's really convenient.
Wow, sounds
Ah, and
awesome.
just as a side, are you going to be covering that in your course
I
on how to do
am.
that?
Yeah.
Yay.
I'm about 90% of the way done the course. There's just a few lessons that I need to record and wrap up. And so
Yep.
that will include everything from how to pick out your gear to how to set it up and how to scan virtually every kind of what I call reflective media, things you can just see like prints and albums and
Hmm.
scrapbooks. And then on the transmissive side, which is all the slides and negatives, something you need to look at, and with a light source to see. I go through all of that, even just kind of wacky out there rare formats. Yeah, I cover it all. So excited to
Wow.
bring that to the world. And the other thing that I would say about camera scanning is, this is not for everybody, right? I don't want to
Mm.
try to pitch camera scanning to everybody in the DIY crowd. It's definitely a more expensive setup.
Yep.
You probably spend a couple $1,000s getting all of the lights and camera and equipment.
Hmm.
So it depends on how big your project is. A lot of my clients will have, at least 5 to 10,000 photos that they want scanned, maybe more. And so that can be expensive, right? It's a
Hmm.
big
Hmm.
project. So a couple thousand on scanning versus maybe a couple thousand on equipment. And, you people have to weigh out what makes sense. But uh, it
Mm.
can be a DIY project if you're up for it, or it could be, maybe you scan your own like simple things such as prints, but then for
Yep.
the more obscure formats,
Mm.
old negatives, glass plates, tin types, whatever you might have, slides, things like that that you're struggling with, maybe you kind of split the difference and then find somebody to help you with some of those other ones.
Mm.
Yeah.
That sounds very
Okay.
good. Fiona, you're the scanner here, so.
I know, I love it all too. I find it fascinating. But again, look, I mean, the whole goal of why you would scan is the end
Yeah,
result that, we're,
yeah.
I think the three of us are all, on that same page of the purpose, the reason,
Mm.
why go to all this trouble, or, look into some of these options, um and really ultimately so that we can, enjoy these and share them with loved ones that can appreciate what's in the actual, the
Mm.
content of the of what we're
Yeah.
seeing, watching, or hearing, as you say, Adam.
Yeah, that's right.
um
And sitting in a box in the basement doesn't do it, right?
No,
You've got to.
no.
We live in a pretty digital world, and so it's great to be able to not only preserve those, but that also accelerates the sharing,
Yes.
which is really great.
I love the
yeah,
sharing part. That's
yeah.
always good. So, in practical terms, for our listeners who tend to be the do-it-yourself um, scanners or photo managers, when they want to start converting old files or formats, which format is there a specific format that you would say focus on that first? Go for that.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways to think about that. My first recommendation, broadly, before we even talk about one format, is just gather everything together.
Hmm.
Because when you do it in little bits and fits and starts, it can be hard to understand how big the project actually is, and it kind of snowballs
Hmm.
and grows. So my suggestion is to gather everything up front so you know what you're in for. And that way, if you have some surprise formats that you're not sure how to deal with, then maybe that's where you could divide the project and say, okay, I'll take the prints and I'll find somebody to help me with some of the odd stuff, right?
Hmm.
So I think
Hmm.
gathering is really important up front. And then within that, my other recommendation is uh, try to do like media together. So, for
Hmm.
example, if you were going back and forth between like prints and slides, it would just be inefficient, right?
Hmm.
It would kind of drive you a little crazy. So, whichever format you start with, just get all of that done up front.
Hmm.
and then move on to the next format because it might require a different scanner or a different light source or a different setup or whatever. But just doing like media together will make the process more efficient. And then finally, to actually answer your question about where do you start, those are the broad things I think about. But one of the places to start might be the oldest material.
Mm-hmm.
If it's delicate, if it's fragile, if you're concerned about mold or aging or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
you might start with the old stuff. And especially if you need help from, relatives or grandparents to see who's in those photos,
Mm-hmm.
um, do that now before you
Right.
can't do that anymore, right?
That's a
Get
good
those
Yeah.
point.
stories,
Yes.
share those photos.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So what would be some of the most delicate ones? So if you're saying start with those, what would they kind of, what's your experience of what they would be or what they look like?
Yeah, so let's see. A couple of categories. These are pretty rare, but if anybody has glass plate negatives, that
Hmm.
would be one to, excuse me, that would be one to start with. Most negatives that we're all familiar with are made out of some kind of plastic or polyester.
Mm-hmm.
But the first film negatives were actually made on plates of glass, which, if you think
Mm.
about it, it's pretty heavy,
Wow.
pretty delicate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was actually just scanning some of those last night, and you really have to be careful with them to preserve them. So that would be a delicate
Mm.
one that I would want to keep
Mm.
safe. And then, ironically, prints don't hold up very well. So if I have a print photograph and I have the negative of that same
Mm-hmm.
photo, of that same photo,
Mm.
generally the negative is gonna have aged better. It'll decay less in
Yeah.
terms of color and things like that. So if you only have a print, I would prioritize scanning the print
Mm-hmm.
before it yellows or fades or anything like that.
That's really
Yeah.
interesting because, intuitively one would think the negative is more delicate and not holding up that
Mm,
well. That's interesting. Yes.
Yeah, it with the film, with negatives, you do want to be careful with them, right? You
Yeah.
don't want
Yeah.
to touch them with your bare hands and all of that kind of stuff. You do
Mm.
want to, take good care of them, but they tend to age pretty well.
Okay.
mm, yeah.
And as
Um,
you said before, camera scanning, and I'm aware of it that it's not for everyone, but you say that's faster than scanning negatives on a flatbed, right?
Absolutely. I
Mm.
love efficiency, and I've scanned as many as 800 negatives an hour
Wow.
um, with my camera
wow.
scanning rig. And so when I have clients with large projects, it's nice that they don't have to wait months and months to get this stuff back, right? We can do
Yes.
it and get really good quality really quickly.
Hmm.
And frankly, sometimes with the client projects that I'm working on, sometimes the motivations for these projects are sad reasons, right? They're
Yes.
funerals, they're
Yeah.
people who are ill, or people who are losing
Mm.
their cognitive function and their memory and things like that. So you don't want to sit around and wait for months for that. It's nice to be able to deliver that quickly, so people
Mm.
who want to enjoy them still can.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. Um, so on a lighter note, as far as
Yeah.
finding and discovering some of the mysteries and secrets and exciting sort of moments and things like that, you've obviously had seen a lot of media go through your hands as far as digitizing and different clients and things, or even your own. What are some of the funny or interesting discoveries or something that you've found? That you can share with us in converting that people might say, oh, okay, that's inspired me, that I'm going to do this.
Yeah. So I do love these projects, and it's just fun what you discover. Um, I tend to like some of the more obscure slide formats. So some of those would be like ViewMaster reels. These were originally toys back in the 1930s. And you could get professional photography, or you could get like Disney characters and kind of entertainment content like that. But there was also a possibility to take your own 35 millimeter film and have it shoot it with a special camera, which had two lenses, and it gave this cool 3D effect. And so
Oh,
sometimes I get to
wow.
scan those, which
Wow.
are really fun. And then I don't know, you guys will have to educate me. I don't know if this is just an American phenomenon, but in probably the 1970s and 1980s, little keychains were popular at like beaches and amusement parks. So somebody would take your photo in slide film format and then they'd cut it out real tiny and they put it in this little plastic enclosure. And when you look through it, you could see a photo of yourself. Have you guys seen those?
No.
Yes, I have. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've seen those
okay.
before. Yep.
So it may be a regional thing, but it's basically tiny little slide format. And people would collect these, right? Like every year they'd go to the same beach or something like that, and they'd
Right.
have a collection of them. And so I've been able to scan those for clients. Again, a very
Um,
obscure format, hard to get a hold of, but it can be
yeah.
done, and it's kind
Hmm.
of fun to recover those things.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Um,
One, can I
yeah,
add one
you
other
go.
story?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
So this one's kind of a funny one, and I have to be delicate about how I explain it. But I work with so many clients, and occasionally I have these really crazy moments where I will see somebody either from another client or somebody I know personally, and they'll show up in my
Yes.
client's photos, and I'll say,
Oh,
wait a minute, how does he know Peter? Or,
oh
whatever. So
yeah.
again, I want to be, I need to retain confidentiality, but I may go back and say,
Yes.
hey, so do you happen to know so and so? I noticed them in your
Yes.
photo. And so it's just
Yeah.
kind of fun to connect the dots and see how connected we are, where you're like, how in the world do these people know each other? So kind of some fun
Yeah.
surprises.
That actually, in the same vein of confidentiality, that happened to me with one of my first ever scanning clients. And I was like, wow, this is a small world.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was just, yeah, it was amazing. Someone I'd gone to school with, and it was just like, wow, isn't that
Oh,
amazing?
wow.
Just out of, yeah, you wouldn't read about it, would you? But I guess you do.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah, it is a bit of fun. So now, as far as resources, you've got lots of great stuff, Adam, because you've been in this world, as you say, not just in your own business, but just around your life in this area for so many different years, and your other work outside of your own business. But you've got some great resources and great training courses that I'd just love to share with our listeners as well. As far as what you do now, some of the resources that you've got, it's great for us as photo organizers, and I just think it's really a fabulous tool, possibly even
Mm.
for people to look at that are wanting to sort of jump into this with their own stuff. Some of the things that I love that you've got are these visual guides, and because you're very process driven, and I think this is just sort of tools that you use for yourself, that you've thought, oh, maybe other people might like this.
That's
And I
totally
think,
right. Yep.
yeah, and
I'm
that's,
solving my own problems first, and then I
I
realize
know,
again, I'm not the only
yeah.
person with this problem.
Yes.
Exactly. And I think that's why they're so helpful, because it has been a journey of, you going through it. So some of the things that I'd like to, point that out is that there's some visual guides that you've got. And we're going to put these links up and people can go to them themselves, but they're just such a rich resource, and you've got
Mm.
great details. And I love the way that you just said before, when we sort of first started chatting about, even to think of it from what you see, what you watch, and what you hear. It's just a nice visual
Mm.
view. But these guides, can you just talk through a little bit about what they are, and how, yeah, just sort of the visual guide to, and what people can sort of find from your tools on your website?
Yeah, absolutely. So it goes back to a little bit of the vocabulary issue, right? People will have different photo formats or videotapes. They don't even know what they're called.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
they just don't have the vocabulary. And I even know this stuff, and sometimes I get confused about it. Which one's this size and all of that stuff. So I got tired of that, and so I built these visual guides. One of the things I like, because I'm so visual, is I designed these digital posters and a book that accompanies it. so that everything is actual size. So you can read about it, you can read the history, the dates, the formats, read the dimensions. But then if you have a certain videotape, you can just hold it up to the poster or to, the book or whatever, and it's actual size. So it's just a nice visual identification. And that helps me and the people I work with just understand what we have. And so if I have this certain videotape, is there 30 minutes of content on here, 60 minutes, or maybe there's 6 hours, right? Like
Yeah.
figuring all of that out is really helpful for all of us. So just identifying that material was really my goal. And so that's where the visual guides in the book come in. And true story, I use my own book almost every day. You'd think I'd have this stuff memorized by now, but I look stuff up. What's on page 36? When was this introduced? How big is it? Just looking that stuff up. So like I said, I made it for myself first and realized that some other folks might benefit from it.
Yeah, and look, and I think too, for people that are doing this themselves and they're looking at, say, getting into converting their own media and looking at that, I think this is a great resource for people in that category, because then they can say, you're saying we gather everything together and then we look at our media, you sort of pick one first and go with that. But if they then, it definitely suggests that they check it out and have a look. The book is fabulous, because they can then say, okay, these are different types of tapes. And so when they're calling up for quotes in their local area or something like that, they've got an idea of what they're going to, or they can look on websites as to who does what and sort of get some ideas of costs.
Yep.
And where to start. So it's a great resource for that.
Yeah, and it's tricky because, let's take some of the videotape formats from the 1980s and 1990s. There happen to be 3 formats that all look identical. Like they're the exact same size, but they're different. And some of those tapes are going to play in some cameras and they're not going to play in others. And especially if you're going to tackle this yourself, you don't want to go find a video camera, spend $100 on this and realize, oh, it doesn't work, right? You've got to have that, you got to think through that compatibility and stuff. It's not rocket science, right? But you don't want to be surprised. And so having all that laid out and compared, I think is helpful as you tackle those projects.
I just had another thought too about, we convert these old media formats to new ones so that we can preserve it and pass it on and share the stories. What do you do about the redundancy of formats? So because technology changes quickly, so today a format that's the format that we all use might not exist anymore in 20 years. There will be a new format. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, so that is tricky because I have been unable to predict the future. So
really? Oh, come on,
Adam. We thought you were the superstar of the industry.
it is tricky. So and I actually break down that problem into 2 categories. At first glance, it can look like just one problem, what format, but it's actually 2 problems. One is the format that we're converting to or scanning to or whatever. The second problem is how we're storing it, right? So for example, like in the, let's see, mid 1990s, late 1990s, the zip disk format was really popular. It wasn't a very good format, but it was popular at the time. And there's nothing really wrong with it per se, and those discs could still work, but it is virtually impossible to find a reader and all the adapters to connect it to a modern computer. So even if you had the right formats, let's say you had JPEG files on that disk, there's nothing wrong with the format, but you also have to think about how are you storing it. So we need to think about potentially reconverting our files over time. And with that in mind, we always want to preserve the highest quality, right? We don't want to dumb that down. We want good quality in case we have to convert it again in the future. And then we also need to think about the storage is separate, and that's going to change, right? We all used to use CDs and DVDs. I haven't burned one of those in years. And so so that changes. My sister recently joked that the only DVD player their family has is in the minivan. right? They don't even have one in the house anymore. So if the girls want
Yes.
to watch Disney DVDs, they have to go on a road trip. Um, so the how
uh,
we store it also
Yeah.
changes, and we just need to keep on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would then be once it's converted, it's about maintenance.
Yeah,
And
mm,
obviously,
yeah,
that's not something, you don't need to reconvert every other year. It's not moving that fast, I think.
mm,
So, yeah, okay. That's something
yeah.
to
Good
keep
to
in mind too. And
yeah,
that also
yeah.
goes back to, really invest in good quality and maybe don't use the phone app if you want good
yeah.
quality,
Yeah.
but do
That's
the
right.
thing, if you go through all that trouble, do it properly.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. Because just as another point to be aware of with the conversion and the storage, sort of seeing it as two different things. Because I mean, even those DVDs, that we would do all our backup on the DVDs, I find when I'm converting for people, um, they're a real problem. They don't last long, those DVDs. Do you find that too, Adam?
I do. And I feel terrible because so frequently I have to tell clients who, for some reason, thought this was going to last forever that it didn't. I actually, way
Mm,
back when, I actually used to work in the CD-ROM industry. So I know a ton about the technology behind this. And without
Mm.
completely boring you, I'll jump to the punchline and say a lot of these discs can decay um, within 18 months, right? People thought they were going
Wow.
to last 100 years, and
Wow.
within a year or two, they can start to
Mm.
become unreadable. And the trick with the discs, especially, is it's not like a record. Back in the day where you
Mm-hmm.
could scratch it but still listen to most of the songs.
Mm-hmm.
When a
mm,
disc starts to decay, you're going to lose all of it. Like you're not going to get half the data off of it. It's just not going to work
Mm.
anymore. And so
yeah.
my experience is when I'm converting client optical discs like CDs and DVDs,
Mhm.
on average, about 20% of those fail.
Oh
So,
man.
so
Wow.
that's just
Okay.
motivation. Don't
Mm.
wait. Even
Yes,
though it's digital and you
please.
think it's gonna, yeah, we think that's gonna last forever. It's not.
Mhm.
Get it converted to a hard drive and then get it backed up today.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a very good note.
It is.
We'll be putting that on some social media posts for people. Don't wait. Don't wait.
Yeah,
It's
Yes.
true though. I
Yeah.
mean, we
It
can,
is.
we're in this world and we're around it all the time and we love it, but it's when people realize that they've lost it that then
Mhm.
they say, "Oh, I just wish," or "I wish I'd known," or "I thought that it would have been okay," or
Mm.
we just have to be the pioneers for them to say, "Come on, you can do it." And it doesn't have to. I mean, look, we're doing it because these are precious memories.
Mm.
They're precious moments that are captured, and yeah, we see
yeah,
So,
the
I
joy that
agree.
people have. Mm.
mm. So Adam, before we wrap up today, so how can people find you if they want to learn more and what you offer, or maybe get one of these guides that we mentioned, or something else that you've got on offer? How can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've tried to consolidate all of my guides, the book, the online courses, all in one place. So folks could visit my website. It's chaos2memories.com, just the phrase chaos2memories.com/tools. So that's where I put all my tools and resources. There's a newsletter you could sign up for to kind of stay in touch.
Mm-hmm.
And the new courses that I'll be launching, hopefully this next one will be available in about a week,
Ooh,
real soon here. And all of that will be in one place.
awesome. That sounds very
Fantastic.
exciting.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely put all those details in the show notes. But look, we would just love to say thank you so much for joining us today, Adam. I knew that it would be a lovely chat, and it has been. It's just been such a joy to have you on the DIY photo organizing podcast. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the connection with you guys, and I appreciate the work that you do to bring what you do to your audience. It's as we've said so many times, we're really passionate about this. I come at it from the technology angle, but the real motivation is the stories, the memories, and sharing those with friends and family. And
Mm.
so it's fun to be a part of what you guys are doing. So thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's wonderful. So, thanks for listening in today. And as always, we will pop all the details in the show notes. And don't forget, leave us a review, or always welcome to hear feedback and any questions that you'd like us to cover going forward, just on our social media channels or emailing us, contacting us directly. I am Fiona from Photo Helper.
And I'm Chantal from Photos in Order. And thanks again for tuning in, and happy photo organising.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks again, Adam. Bye.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye
Bye.
bye.